Quick disclaimer. Opinions of host and guest do not represent the views or opinions of Functional Movement Systems. Always consult your physician before beginning any exercise program. This general information is not intended to replace your healthcare professional.
Welcome to the Movement Podcast. This show is all about movement. We tackle it from different angles, bring on guests, answer questions, go on a few tangents, and give practical advice, giving you guys a better idea of how you can optimize the human body to be the best it can be. Let's preview what's coming up in this episode.
Today's guest is Brett Jones. He is the Director of Education for StrongFirst, a certified athletic trainer, and a strength and conditioning specialist based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's also a longtime friend and contributor with FMS. In this episode, Brett and the guys cover many topics related to strength and movement. They discuss kettlebells, Indian clubs, how to create and optimize strength, and ways to protect yourself from injury. It's a great discussion and lots to unpack. So chalk up and get ready for today's episode of the Movement Podcast, powered by FMS.
I'm really excited today. We've got Brett Jones with us, who is the Director of Education for StrongFirst, and I'm sure we'll be getting to a lot of what StrongFirst is if some of you guys don't know what that is. But Brett has also been our lead instructor and really was one of the cornerstones to developing a lot of the education that we've had over the last 20-some years. And we've known Brett Gray for probably going on 25. This is our 25th anniversary, by the way, Gray and I's. And Brett actually met Gray even before that. So Brett, thanks for coming on today. Really excited. I'm really excited because we haven't talked and had time to catch up and chat in a while because of all the chaos that's happened. But Brett, thanks for coming on, man.
I'm thrilled to be on. It has been a 26-year journey that we've been on. And I can remember 26 years ago, standing in my training room, and this big old red-haired, redneck-looking guy walks in the room and goes, "Hey, my name's Gray Cook. You need some help?" And that was the start of a beautiful friendship, as the movie would tell us.
So, yeah, I think so. Lee was the head athletic trainer at our large city high school. Brett was the head athletic trainer at Hargrave Military Academy. These two schools are only like 15 miles apart. And eventually we wound up with two physical therapy clinics right between these two. And we just sort of hit the ground running together.
So I'm going to kick it off and tell one story, which kind of you guys make fun of me, shocking to make fun of me about. But the first time I met Brett, one of the first things we were doing, because we were doing the clinic that Gray and you were at, of course I was working at the high school, we were also doing high school outreach.
Yes. And
one of the things that we were going to do based off of my understanding from the time is really engage the local life-saving crew who were covering the high school, games and really try to get to know that group of people and talk to them about who athletic trainers were. In this area, athletic trainers, nobody knew who they were. The high schools didn't even know. The coaches didn't know what an athletic trainer was back then. And we were very fortunate to have an orthopedic surgeon who really understood the role of a good athletic trainer and how that person was a huge asset to a high school. Well, long story short, we went into the local life-saving crew, and we were going to do a presentation on how to spine board. And Gray, if my memory recalls, was like, "Lee, you and Brett lead this conversation." And I'm green. I'm right out of graduate school, probably the second or third day on the job. You guys are like, I'm like, well, crap, I got to remember how to spine board somebody because it's not something you do every day. So Brett says, "Well, I'll take the lead." And the next thing I know, Brett, I'll let you take it from there.
We've got Lee in shoulder pads and a football helmet, and we've got him strapped to the spine board, and we're showing them how to cut because at the time we were cutting the clips and taking the face mask off so that you could access airway and things like that. And so we finish up, we do our bit, and Lee stands up, and he still has the helmet on, and Gray's standing beside me, and I start getting the elbow, and I'm like, I look at him, he goes, Oh, he's like, oh God, Speed Racer.
So this is probably beyond anybody's time, but there was a cartoon a billion years ago with this little guy with long eyelashes and dark hair and a little white helmet. And
With a red stripe on it.
Yeah, Speed Racer. But, oh my goodness.
So I became Speed Racer for a period of time. And unbeknownst to me, I didn't know. I was sitting there thinking, oh, this is kind of going pretty well. And everybody's giggling and laughing. And I'm like, well, shit, this kind of sucks. So Google Speed Racer, and you will know exactly what that is.
Looks a lot like Lee with a football helmet
With a
and no
football
face
helmet
mask. But no, it was a wonderful journey, and we were talking right before we started recording this, just saying how cool it was that somehow, without ever mentioning it, we developed an ethos that just said, let's raise the bar on ourselves. Let's see if we can do a little bit better. I was fresh out of really learning some, I think, pretty cool manual therapy techniques. And, a lot of people would see me do something with a joint and say, well, are you a chiropractor too? And I'm like, well, we're using a lot of the same vehicles with our hands and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a whole different world of looking at joints and muscles than you learned in kinesiology class. And I never wanted to do it by myself. Almost every course we ever did, I might go off and Brian Mulligan, Shirley Sarman, or strength conditioning course. And I said, I want all you guys to become strength coaches. I want to show you all the manual therapy we got. I'll probably end up doing more of the backs and necks, but I want us all to have a communication and accountability. And out of that relationship grew the screen. It's just a great way to measure stuff and all realize we got some reliability looking at something. We still may handle it different, but the cool thing was we tried to really get lined up in agreement on assessment. And really, it was that relationship that created the technology. The technology didn't create the relationship. The relationship and the no-look passes we learned to do with each other and handle athletes and parents and coaches and doctors was really, I think, what spurred a technology that is just basically a paint by numbers for other people to know how to do it.
Following up on that, Gray, I think the one thing that kind of paint this picture for a lot of people that are out there listening and try to put it in their perspective too, is that we really were trying to push each other on certain areas, certainly questioning what each of us were doing. And Brett, you took off. It wasn't like, Brett's been in our little town. I mean, Gray, we've been in the same place for 25 years, but Brett, you kind of did your thing here at Hargrave, but as anybody who knows the world of athletic training, you get burnt out pretty quick, and you left. Kind of give us that kind of transition for you.
Yeah, so 97, I left and went back to another metropolis of Clarion, PA, and ran a hospital fitness center for 5 years. And during that time, I came back and was part of the first FMS workshop, which was back in like 99 at the old clinic in Danville.
Yeah.
And, but I was running this hospital wellness center where it was in a PT clinic, so we transitioned a lot of folks from rehab to wellness or working out fitness. So I was working with Parkinson's, stroke, joint replacements, orthopedic issues, neurological issues. I mean, I didn't know how you were in the fitness world without an athletic training degree.
So you really were bridging the gap before Bridging the Gap was a book by Sue Falsoni.
So, absolutely. So I'm an OG in many ways. And if people all across the world don't laugh at that, it's a lost moment. It's a lost joke because you don't know me well enough. So yeah, and I'm dropped into this kind of grinder where I'm working with all of these different folks, and orthopedic evaluation, rehabilitation continued to be really important in what I was doing, and just the ability to work with the physical therapist and the PTAs and have these smooth transitions was really great. And come down and learn the screen in 99, and then right around 2000 started finding out about Pavel and kettlebells and things like that. Went and got certified in February of 2002, and April of 2003 started teaching with Pavel. Put out a couple DVDs, and then I get a call early 2006. And I think it was might have been an email first. It was looking for Brett Jones, thought he was dead because I had dropped off the radar. I'm living up in Clarion, PA, and doing my thing. And
because I think, Gray, didn't you see a
Yeah, I was sitting on a U.S. Air flight
Kettlebell magazine.
The way it was in those days is I'd get my NSCA journal and a PT journal and a couple of other strength conditioning journals, and I got this new Magalog magazine, Dragon Door, and I'm thumbing through it, wondering who this Russian guy is, and learning about kettlebells. Called Perform Better and asked Chris Poirier, I'm like, can you get me some kettlebells? I sort of want to play with these things. And he goes, well, we don't even have them, but I think they got them over in the track and field division. I'm like, do they think they're shot puts? Anyways, some of the track and field guys were using them, but it was not a fitness product. I flipped to like the middle of the thing and I see you and Castro Giovanni, I think, maybe.
Probably.
And I'm like, looks a little similar to Brett, but I remember a guy that sort of wore a fanny pack and khakis and stuff like that. And this guy's gotten a little buff. And so that's when I sent that email. I was getting ready to say, did I send a text? But we didn't know what texts were then. I sent that email out. Brett got back with me and really, we were sitting here in the functional training world. And it was bands and it was lighter weights. And we were really trying to true up movement. And Brett really opened my eyes to the history and wisdom in strength training with a tool that goes back 300 years, way before bicep curls mattered to anybody or we tried to sculpt the body. They literally just took an off-center load, lifted it slow, lifted it fast, lifted it in a get-up position, and pulled and pressed it. And I'm like, I'd always been a fan of unilateral training with a dumbbell. We were cleaning and snatching dumbbells in those days, but I'm like, this makes so much more sense. And Brett got my wife Danielle and I ready to do our RKC event. And she was way more ready for it than I was. But I was introduced to an entire subculture at the time that was really embarking on a functional journey without even knowing it. I was seeing a lot more functional results from training with a kettlebell than I was from a way people were training with a straight bar. And I'd already been an Olympic weightlifting coach for a while, but I saw so many people misuse the straight bar in the weight room that I'm like, I could do more of this with athletes and not create an injury in the weight room than I could over there, because when you see a straight bar, the only thing you start thinking about is how heavy, not how well,
When I remember coming into town and working with you guys at the house and on the back porch, and one of the first things we did with Danielle was work on our breathing. And I was looking at breathing at that point way more from a performance standpoint. Understanding from Pavel these what we term anatomical breathing and biomechanical breathing match and things like that. And that was a big moment, because that was when we, I think, really started tapping into the breathing, the diaphragm, how all this stuff is working together. And like I said, I was looking at it more from a performance standpoint.
Yes.
Because I can amplify your strength right now by teaching you how to properly power breathe and nail a biomechanical breathing match. It wasn't until we had gone a little further down the rabbit hole of the breathing for health that we really started to incorporate. But it was one of the things when Secrets of the Shoulder and talking about breathing and T-spine mobility, all of this stuff, there's been, I would refer to everything we've done over the years as very organic.
A lot of things now, it's almost forced with social media, in my opinion. Just things that are quote unquote organic or almost, people are trying to do things and trying to make something different. Take something that's really good, well, let's see how many bells and whistles I can throw on it. And before they even try and see if it works, it's up on social media, and people are trying to get hits or whatever. Whereas then, I would argue that we weren't necessarily trying to go out and teach movement screen courses.
No, the one thing we weren't doing is developing a product. We never even thought that it would do anything but enhance our relationships and our responsibilities, And the one thing I want everybody to understand is the three of us are not savants. We don't have secret knowledge in movement, but we agreed a long time ago, we're going to set a baseline, and each of us may approach that baseline a little bit different with our skill set and our background. But ultimately, if we didn't change the baseline, we're not patting ourselves on the back. And if we did, we're going to basically say, okay, what's next? And it was simply the fact that when it came to this mixed up world of movement, and some people got force plates and some people got bioelectric sensors, we went back to the roots and said there's some fundamental things in movement we got to agree on. We've all got different exercise and rehab backgrounds, and yet since we agreed on that, we could see when your technique was working better than mine, or his idea was working better than yours, or whatever. And that's where I think it actually enhanced our relationship. We agreed on a baseline. We agreed on a retest. All right, let's go. And I think that's how organic works. You do have a finish line, a stopwatch, and a feedback loop, so you don't start thinking you're the best thing since sliced bread.
Well, the timing of reconnecting with you, Brett, was so important. Looking back at all this, because when you're doing it, you're in the weeds. We're 25 years into this, and you go back to 2005, 2006, we had kind of really honed the seminar. I mean, we had a pretty decent little movement screen seminar. Movement screen was starting to gain some popularity. And as you just said, Gray, now what? Well, that now what is when Brett kind of reemerged. Because ultimately, the one thing that I still think even today we get pigeonholed into the corrective exercise world, it was always still about trying to gain strength and get people stronger, get people performing better. So that's really connecting the dots with you at that time was pretty critical in our evolution.
When I got over in the kettlebell community and were meeting Pavel and many of the guys that were training with Brett, I really think that functional training and corrective exercise had left a bad taste in their mouth, because most of the people who were under that umbrella, I don't think had a strength training background, and they were almost scared to push people into those really stressful, strength-giving exercises. So it was almost like functional training, corrective exercise were strength training light. And I don't really think any of us embrace that. If you're not doing a hard move because you feel intimidated by it, then you just need to change your education. But it really gave us an opportunity to just say, functional training is not about the product you're using. It's not about light barbells and dumbbells and bands. It's about, does this exercise transfer into both better movement and better conditioning, or does it just make you better at this exercise? And that transferability is what I really tried to connect with Pavel, because even he was sort of like, well, I don't know about the functional training. I'm like, listen, does it upset you when everybody watches your kettlebell DVDs and nobody watches your flexibility DVDs? And he goes, absolutely. And I'm like, that's because they're strength training with a dysfunctional base. And you have done an elegant thing, everything from Naked Warrior to the flexibility stuff to the strength training. But people go after the sexy stuff. And so they come to their RKC workshop with very poor flexibility and very poor fundamental movement, asking you to make them stronger. And so we're catching that with this screen, but the way we fix it is any way you want to fix it, because now you got that feedback loop.
Well, and the interesting thing is, years ago, and been teaching kettlebell certification since 2003 and certified since 02, and I can remember people early on telling me what a fad it was and how nobody's going to be doing this in 5 years, and we're still doing it. A little bit of that. But with those early days, we would spend the first 4 hours of a workshop just getting people to break parallel in a squat.
I know.
Like it was. So we developed a lot of tools and things within the StrongFirst world, and with Pavel's that were just focused on getting people to be able to access the moves, and that was, and I think between FMS and StrongFirst, I think we've had a tremendous impact, because now people show up. Basically, everybody can rock bottom a squat. Everybody's pretty dialed in on some of the basic movements. And I think that's due to how that's been highlighted within these two communities, and how these two communities have really worked together over the last few years. And I say few years, since 2006, 2000, whatever. So it's been an interesting journey, but the goal was always to get them to load. If you look at Naked Warrior, and one of the things that was very impactful for you, I think, as far as Pavel was concerned, was, hey, he's talking about symmetry. Be able to do the same thing on the right as you can do on the left.
Give our listeners some background. Pavel did this book a long time ago. It's called Naked Warrior, and obviously he had on clothes in the book, but what he's actually talking about is, I've got no weight, I've got nothing. I'm going to go through all the necessary stages to build a pistol, a single leg squat below parallel, and I'm going to go through all the necessary stages to build a one-arm push-up. And if you think about that, there are some people that are gifted enough to be able to do those things right off the bat. And the younger you start, the better it is. But if you've got to regain that after some bumps and bruises and baseball and football and whatever, wrestling, whatever else we do, these are hard movements to access, but Pavel really broke it down, scaled it back. It looks a little bit like yoga in some moves, and it looks a little bit like planking in others. But at the end of the book, you see how quick it is. And the one relevant thing I made, because I was writing a book called Athletic Body and Balance at the time, and what I had realized is Pavel got you to a very impressive movement screen without screening you. But I don't know how long that book's going to take you or him or me. So you got to go at your own pace, but if you want to speed it up, the movement screen helps. If you will, basically the way creates the warrior. If you will follow that layout, I think it's one of the most elegant things I've ever seen. And the goal of a one-arm push-up on each side equally well and a pistol on each side equally well, I got no problems with your function. I really don't.
Single leg stance, ankle mobility, midsection stability, your ability to handle off center load. I mean, it's all wrapped in there. And so I think, to Lee's point of getting pigeonholed into corrective exercise and things of that nature, as effective as the cook bands and the drills and things that we do to quickly change movement the goal has always been, let's get you doing the things you want to be doing. I'm a knuckle dragger. I'm a knuckle dragger at heart. I want to pick heavy things up and put them down.
When we did your 23andMe, didn't you have quite a bit more Neanderthal genetic makeup in you than most?
Yes, I did.
That probably explains your deadlifting prowess then, huh?
It's one of the factors.
Well, that's right, Brett. I mean, it is about identifying what you need to focus on to get you to where you want to go, and wherever that place is what whether it's the movement screen or even some of the things you did with the kettlebell community, that's the goal. And I think that's what we're always trying to do. And I think it got to a point, if we really go back and look between almost 2005 and early 2000, all the way up to 2000, I'd say today, is that, well, we got it. What are your corrective exercises? What are you doing? Well, it got overblown, and we were part of that. I mean, we were talking about corrective exercise. We said, well, we got to do your correctives, but only because that's what you needed, and that was going to help you the most to get you where you needed to go. Not that was just what blanket everybody with something corrective exercise-wise, because there were some people that don't need it. And I think that's really what we need to do. So let's take a quick break, and we're going to come back and get into some other cool stuff.
Awesome.
You want to improve your kettlebell workouts? Indian clubs may just be the missing link. While kettlebells are great at improving strength and power, Indian clubs are great at improving your speed, coordination, balance, and flexibility. Pairing these two can drive positive results across your entire workout. Club swinging is a perfect complement to kettlebell training. When you have compensation and struggle weight training, you often pick up bad form. It's almost impossible to get bad form with Indian clubs because those things either move or they're awkward. In the course, we cover classical moves all the way to advanced moves and even show you how they can be used as correctives in your workout. If you want a greater challenge, check out our clubs course at functionalmovement.com.
Get 30% off the FMS Introduction to Indian Clubs online course using promo code CLUBCOURSE. That's promo code CLUBCOURSE for 30% off. Offer valid for a limited time only.
All right, so Brett, one of the last things you said is you like to pick up heavy shit. And again, if you guys out there haven't seen Brett or know Brett, Brett's not a big guy. And when you say that you can lift the stuff that I know you can lift, you would think you've got to be, 6'2" and, be 280 pounds and just be, ripped. But that's not always the case. So kind of walk us through that journey of taking someone and when they walk in the door, how do you progress them to lifting, in your words, heavy shit?
So step one, clear the baseline. I got to know where your movement issues are. And I think that's, one of the things people fear being told they can't do something. But those conversations are very brief. Let's take a break from this. Let's do this. And so if I open up ankles, hips, and T-spine, if I know that you have good midsection stability, that ability to resist the extension stress, that ability to handle the off-center load, then I'm way more comfortable taking you into those training routines and loads and volumes that you need to have to build strength.
Let me interrupt real quick, because I've heard track coaches as accomplished as yourself and martial arts instructors as accomplished as yourself say the exact same thing. Isn't that,
yeah,
it's unique, whether you're going for speed or explosive martial power, or you're going to lift something very big, fast, or slow. I really think that functional base, and without really saying the screen or the YBT, if I can see that you have a movement problem getting up off the floor or walking, then that's where I need to meet you for your movement problem, because it's just going to get sucked into the vortex of the speed, the punch, or the lift that you're getting ready to ask me to teach you, you know?
Get the roadblocks out of the way. Because
and people think that's such a buzzkill, you know? And you know, the novice walks up to a car and goes, how fast will it go? But if I'm going to test drive it, I want to know how well does it stop. I'll figure out how fast it can go in a minute, but I got a really important question for you first. And most people just don't think about that. When they see heavy things, they don't think, well, they think how much, you know, and so.
Well, and you're going to be loading the system. I mean, you know, when we talk about getting into heavy strength training, and heavy's relative, right? We can put quotation marks around that all day and talk about how.
Well, but okay, dive into that a little bit, Brett. When you
Yeah.
say relative, let's take if you have a female come into your workshop that assumes they can't do a single leg deadlift with a 24K. Don't make that assumption, right? And don't let them think they can't do it.
Absolutely. One of the greatest things when kettlebells first came out, they were all in kilos. So I would hand somebody an 8-kilo bell, 16 pounds, or a 12-kilo bell, 25, 26 pounds, and I would have them do something with it. And then they'd say, oh, yeah, that 8 pounds, that felt pretty good. I'm like, no, that's 8 kilos. That was 16 pounds. You're actually way stronger than you think you are. Mm-hmm. And we could probably do a whole other podcast on the psychology of strength and the fact that, I was the 11th guy in the world to bend a red nail.
And a red nail is?
A red nail is a 5/16 by 7-inch long piece of cold roll steel. So you get to wrap the ends of the nail. It's tough.
It's a piece of steel bigger around than a pencil and not that long. And I've even tried to even put a little bit of pressure on one. I can't. Number one, I don't know how you handle the pain to do it, but it's all in technique. But the other thing.
Hold on. You mentioned something right there, Greg. It's all in technique. And that's what you have to get to.
Technique is strength. Strength is technique. And nobody says, oh, he's not a good shooter. He just has good technique. He's not a good basketball player. He just has good technique. You assume that the technique is what makes them really good at those activities. Well, that's strength.
That's exactly strength. And the one thing that I think I've heard you say so many different ways is the art of strength is making something hard seem easier, and that can be done in the same session. Strength is not about the SAID principle, specific adaptation to imposed demand, or the stress recovery cycle. The very biggest part of strength is technique on the outside. On the inside is reorganizing neurological system, and I always drop this stat, 4 to 6 weeks of a new strength training activity, you have no change in tissues. It's all you're upgrading the app and learning how to run it better, upgrading the app and learning how to run it better, and there's absolutely no physical change in your body whatsoever, even though in that first 4 to 6 weeks you normally make your greatest, most aggressive strength gain you ever will. You will get stronger, but not at this rate of change. And so that introduction of a new stress, a new technique, both reorganizes your neurological system for efficiency, but also outwardly teaches you the benefits of proper technique, alignment, breath, balance, control. And so many people lose that and just think, maybe 2 more beatdowns and I'll get stronger. No, you'll just have 2 more beatdowns on you.
Absolutely. Strength is a skill. One of the first things that Pavel hammered into my thick little skull is that strength is a skill.
And that was probably harder for him with you than anybody else because, dude, you're naturally strong. Your grip strength is not something, yes, you've developed it, but you already had a lot to work with. And body relative, your deadlift has been what? At what body weight?
My best was 573, competing at 196. 198, I weighed about 196. 518 squat. Bench was never my strong suit. Had a over 300-pound bench, but that's pathetic for competing in the 198 weight class in powerlifting. And really what unlocked a lot of my strength and gave me the ability to focus it was kettlebell training. It was the things Pavel was teaching me about breath, how to optimize your breath to increase your strength, how to activate, be a strength professional. You know, we want the way, to your point of making hard things look easy, if you watch or you're in the car with a Formula One race driver, you don't even feel the gears change. You just go faster. Well, get in the car with somebody who's learning how to drive a stick. And
I've taught two teenage females how to drive a stick.
So after you get over the whiplash and the getting jerked back and forth in the car, but that's how most people strength train.
Yeah.
They're strength amateurs instead of strength professionals. And you develop your journey towards building greater skill, knowing how to incorporate these tension techniques, the breathing, and that psychology of strength. There's a will. You have to be willing to be strong.
No, and there's a quick anecdote here. When Brett and I first brought the brilliance of the Turkish get-up to the fitness community at Perform Better and at the NSCA, not many people knew what we were doing, but it was a breath of fresh air because not many people could do it wrong. Brett and I initially, even though we had a wall full of kettlebells, initially taught a Turkish get-up with you laying flat on your back, getting in the start position, but balancing your own shoe on your flat fist. And a lot of people thought we were insulting their fitness or poo-pooing their strength. We weren't, because halfway through the get-up, they're like, and why am I doing with this with a shoe again? Meanwhile, the shoe falls off their hand, hits them on the top of the head, and Brett would go, now aren't you glad it wasn't a kettlebell? and so that is the point where people are so willing to dump technique to simply experience and perform the thing. And I'm like, no, I want you to watch a few of these. Okay, I want you to feel a few of these with no load. And believe it or not, if you don't have mobility problems, the load actually helps you be more stable because it gives you more sensory information. But you're going to make a lot of mistakes going through these transitional patterns going up. And that ability to have that perfectly vertical load, brilliant. As a matter of fact, I think when you and I were doing a lot of the work in the Turkish get-up stuff, we were almost looking historically at, I don't think they were using this as an exercise as much as they were using it as a screening tool. Meaning, if you can't do that, I think I'm not going to teach you this yet. And it's brilliant.
Well, Brett, yeah, kind of going back to walking someone through it, and you talk about the psychology. Touch on that a little bit. So when you remove the roadblocks, and the roadblock, one of the things you said there was you talk about breathing being so important. Well, breathing could be the roadblock as well, and you got to start. I would assume you're going to start with the most fundamental thing that they have as a roadblock, clear that, and then you're going to add in some of these strength components. But kind of keep walking us through that situation.
Absolutely. So once we clear the roadblocks, one of the first things I'm getting to is the kettlebell, because I can incorporate all of my high tension techniques, my breathing techniques, and skill.
When you say high tension, explain that.
Okay. So principle of irradiation, right? So if I squeeze or activate one muscle, the other muscles in the area want to cheer and help along. So we increase activation via
sort of an authentic sequence. The way you were meant to work is when you take your grip seriously or you overgrip a little bit, everything that's supposed to happen naturally happens a little bit better if it wasn't already. So that little bit of overemphasis on the right body part creates harmony that you wouldn't otherwise have.
Well, and quick side journey, with high tension techniques, what we're talking about doing is feed forwarding your tension. I know I'm going to pick up something heavy, so I am going to prepare my structure to do that. versus a more authentic or reactive strategy that is going to happen when I'm playing a game. I'm not nobody's running around the soccer pitch going, bracing their core for every step. They're running around the soccer pitch concerned about what's happening with the ball and their opponent. And so you have to have both of those strategies in place.
And you know what? That's a great point, Brett. I know you said sidebar, but I think that's something to kind of dive into just a little. Is that's been also a misunderstood concept? Is that when you talk about breathing, fundamental breathing, that's something that we do as humans. Versus
21,000 times a day.
Yeah, versus what you have to train someone to do when they're getting ready to pick something up, and what Pavel was talking about performance-wise. And you got to make sure the fundamentals there first.
Absolutely.
You helped me with deadlifting a while back with a few very important cues that go to both that. I'm a big guy, but pound for pound, I'm nowhere close to your strength. And so I do two things, bending over and grabbing a bar. I'm going to probably hold my breath, and I'm probably going to jerk it because I just want to get this shit over with, right? I'm already a little bit intimidated by the weight you put on the bar. You make me slow down. You say wedge yourself between the bar and the floor and use your breath to help you. And that doesn't mean you're holding it. You're actually organizing. So what you showed me, and what made a lot of sense to me, is you showed me how to coil the spring. So when the weight comes off the floor, that's actually easier than getting in position.
Yes.
Or it was for me at first. But like light bulbs went off in my head because I'm a farm boy. I just grab stuff and jerk on it and hope it winds up in the back of the truck. But that's not the way. We don't have to do that this way. We can actually treat this and give this the respect it's worth. And it's actually very invigorating, almost getting lightheaded in a good way when you do a deadlift properly and no part of it hurts and no one part of it is harder than the rest. And that you taught me that, and I already thought I knew how to lift weights. So
treat your light weights heavy so your heavy weights feel light.
There you go.
And that's an old-time strongman that had that quote. It's not me. But it's a truism, and it's knowing how to upgrade your software, knowing how to have these patterns happen better, knowing how to improve just the overall sequencing and patterning. And so the high tension techniques come in because with irradiation and with breathing techniques, so we focus on power breathing and some breath holds. So obviously for anybody listening that has high blood pressure or has been warned by their cardiovascular, if you have heart problems, talk to your doctor first. But these high tension techniques and the breathing techniques, what we're trying to do is pressurize the midsection. There are baroreceptors in your midsection that allow you to turn the amplifier up and play the music louder, to be stronger. And conversely, when you can't pressurize the midsection, your body will turn the volume knob down on your amplifier. And so we focus on grip, abs, glutes, and lats. Lats are a huge one. And this is something that when people deadlift, they don't get their lats involved. Well, the lats are the only thing that connect your upper body to your lower body. So if I'm getting ready to grab onto a bar connected to my upper body and push with my legs, and I don't create that bridge, that's a problem, because guess who takes the load? Your back.
Yeah. And real quick for our guest, if you follow the fascial line of the right latissimus dorsi, your right lat, it inserts on your deep lumbar fascia, which inserts on your left glute, which becomes your left ITB. So you have this beautifully well-organized tensegrity, this X across your back, and by engaging your lat, you don't have to think about your glute. And if once you've done it a few times, you can just engage your glute and the lat and everything talk, because they are in the same sequence, often trained in isolation, but never intended to work that way.
Well, and that's something we talked about a long time ago as far as the lat and the shoulder. Because when I take you up into the classic kind of 90-90 position where maybe I was going to test your shoulder or something like that, well, the lats become the anterior containment for
Yes.
and it's a force coupling mechanism for how your glenoid and shoulder are going to function. Now, rotator cuff had to fire first. We had force coupling mechanisms that had to happen back there in the glenoid, but then that lat is a key component to being able to press or go overhead effectively. And knowing how to use your lat in your pressing motions is key. So these high tension techniques, these things that we bring together, allow you to upgrade your software instantaneously and be stronger right now. And then it's my job as a coach to continue to refine your technique, to continue to make sure that you're applying that strength in the best way possible. Because your old saying, power punishes, speed kills. Well, your power will punish you and your speed will kill you if you do not know how to control it.
Well, so if right now somebody were very early to strength training, but they really wanted to get some fundamentals down, it's not like you need to be doing 8 different lifts, is it?
No, I think that's one of the other brilliant things that Pavel's done over the years is this. He has a true drive towards minimalism. And so his first book, one of his first books, Power to the People, deadlift, side press. That was it. That was the routine.
Now, I think everybody listening knows a deadlift, and obviously just, I see a lot of people thinking they're deadlifting with a trap bar, and that's sort of a way to cheat your deadlift. I think just the straight bar right up the front and keep those tibias back. And so if it looks like a squat, you're probably squatting. The deadlift doesn't look like a squat. What's a side press?
Side press is a military press, but with some leaning of the body. So in combination with leaning away from the weight, you are also pressing the weight. This is versus a bent press where you are actually getting under the weight without pressing it.
Well, a lot of people would say, well, if I'm facing the mirror with a dumbbell and I'm doing a one-arm press, I don't want to lean. I got to keep my spine organized. But you didn't say flex lumbar. What you said is keep the weight between your feet, because that's the way gravity likes it best, and that's the way you actually have the most control over the weight. If it's out beyond your base of support and that far away from your center of mass, you're going to create unnecessary work. And I see a lot of people lifting in bad angles and thinking because it's harder, it's better, and it's actually exactly the opposite. If you had to do this 600 times, that's the best way to do it.
Well, and that's one of the best descriptions, and it's from you on the Get Up, but I think it applies to almost everything we do. Alignment with integrity under load. Mm-hmm. That gets you. That accomplishes so much.
And it sort of does a feed forward for your stability. Unfortunately, a lot of your stability is subconscious. It really is. And that's why I throw this out to both of you guys. If people pick the correct exercise and then did it correctly, we wouldn't need to do corrective exercise nearly as much as we do. So not all corrective exercise is imposed on you because you got something wrong with you. I would say more often than not, we're giving you corrective exercise because you've been doing something wrong for 15 years or 10 years. You're doing something very wrong in your running. You're doing something very wrong in your lifting. You're doing something very wrong. And that habit is now created a functional problem. But listen, picking exercises correctly and picking fewer exercises and then doing more correctly literally removes the need for corrective exercise. Because if you come to an exercise with appropriate mobility and do it right, it takes care of the stability. The alignment with integrity under load is something the coach should be introducing you to. So, I've had this talk with a lot of different strength coaches. If you bring the right mobility to an exercise and coach the exercise right, the stability work takes care of itself. And it used to, right up until about 1980 something. And then we had to start supplementing stability like side planks and stuff like that because people were not trained in a functional fashion. They were allowed to lift with mobility problems and they were allowed to explode with stability problems.
So, but a key point there to come back to is if you haven't set a baseline for how they're moving, you don't know if they're bringing the right mobility to that correct exercise.
Exactly.
So correct exercise has always been important. But if I clear the baseline and let's say I find a locked up ankle, well, doing a squat more correctly, probably not going to open up that ankle.
Right. It's not, you're going to continue to compensate around it. And I think, one thing we can touch on and, to me is, we come back to remove the roadblocks. And of course, one of the ways we do that is to do a movement screen. Yep. And I think people are getting to the point where, especially now, people are getting to the point where the pendulum swung to one side, in my opinion, where people are over assessing. You know, we got to assess, and how many, taking 45 minutes to assess somebody is not necessarily in the weight room or the fitness area. It may be necessary if you got a back problem and we got to figure out what's going on. But if you're getting ready to go lift, you don't necessarily need to do that. So the pendulum, in my opinion, swung so far where screens and assessments were almost frowned upon.
Yep.
Now it's going back to where, well, if I just exercise you right, I don't need to do that.
Right.
And I don't want what Gray is saying to be misconstrued. Gray said, well, if I watch you walk, I know that you need to be doing something. Well, if you're not walking right, I still don't know why.
Exactly.
You don't know why you're having a problem. And that's kind of what you're getting to, Brett, is you still have to understand that most people are walking in broken right now. Right. The data is telling you 75 to 80% of the people walking in that want to start exercising have a problem. Well, you just don't know where the problem is.
Let me reiterate this. Brett and I were discussing the risk factors this morning that lead to musculoskeletal health risk. Pain with movement right off the top is one. But the cluster of signals we get from global movement, like the Y-balance test or the functional movement screen, are more prevalent in those 15 or 16 risk factors that are emerging in the research than anything else. And yet we're talking 10 minutes, right? You flunk a movement screen, I'd love to know your YBT. You flunk a YBT, I'd love to know your movement screen. The YBT really does tell me if you're functionally sick, and the FMS tells me which one of these movement pattern medicines you need. And thanks to Phil Plisky and Kyle Kiesel, they've really helped us understand. So there are legitimate things you can do in the first 10 minutes to know how many risk factors this person has who's asking me for fitness or rehabilitation. How about that? How about the therapists and chiropractors and athletic trainers out there realizing that this isn't just an ACL. This is an ACL with scoliosis, pain on a prone press up, and a locked up ankle. That's a whole different day. That's a whole different patient, and they deserve those things to be acknowledged, because who else is going to catch them? Their basketball coach, their orthopedic surgeon? No.
But Brett, that's going to make your job, going back to kind of this whole case we're looking at building strength. Yeah. The thing when I see people say, well, I don't need to do a movement screen, I'm going to take care of it during their workout. Well, okay, fair enough. But by doing your process of removing the roadblocks, it's the tortoise versus the hare. You're going to get there quicker.
Absolutely.
Over time, you will get there quicker and have somebody stronger, rather than just saying, I don't need to do any of assessments. My workout's going to take care of it.
Absolutely. And to your point of the pendulum, and something that I've been talking about, is pendulums do not swing to the middle, they swing through it. So we love to go from extreme to extreme. So yes, it was years ago, it was if you're not assessing, you're guessing, and then it's I don't need to do any of it. Well, the truth, as always, is usually somewhere in the middle. And the middle range is at least have a baseline. So if I skip that step and I go and start squatting you and I see something wrong in your squat, I now have to go back and check and see, is it a movement problem? Because if I keep banging away on your squat and you got a locked up ankle that actually needs a quick mobilization or has a bone spur, like there's a reason you're lacking ankle mobility. I want to take all that stuff off the table first. It's just a more efficient process. And it makes me, and I need all the help I can get, it makes me look a lot smarter to the person that I'm getting ready to train, because I have this opportunity to create an individualized program that gets rid of the roadblocks and gets them to their goals faster.
The only purpose of exercise is to enhance the stress recovery cycle. Meaning if I give you more stress than you can recover from, you're actually going to be in more debt. Secondly, if you're not even well recovered from the non-active lifestyle you have now, what happens when I add activity? If I don't add it in a prudent dosage, you're not going to sleep better. You're not going to hydrate better, and it's actually going to impose worse breathing. So there's a ripple effect that happens when we impose stress. And when you pick that stress, you've got to pick it well before you pick it often. And so a lot of people want to get after it with exercise. They just want to feel something. And if you pick the stress in the right place, you got plenty of time to correct the other stuff. But most people want to do certain moves, whether they can or can't, and letting them doesn't really do too good. But these are people who just don't have explanations of why we shouldn't do it this way. And You've never had to over-explain that. I've never had to over-explain that. The confidence level of we're going to get there, and this is the path we're taking. Yeah. And you gotta be confident in that. You can't just listen to what we're saying and tell somebody that. You need to screen, you need to rescreen, and you need to own what you didn't change, and you need to own what you did change, because now after that first screen, you're in control of the program.
And that's so to draw back, and we're trying to lay this out, and of course, as we always do, we tangent and we keep swinging from subject to subject, but clear the baseline. Get them learning some of these high tension techniques. And that can be a variety of body weight moves, just amplifying your push-up, your plank, getting your goblet squat dialed in, getting your get-up dialed in, and getting to kettlebell moves like the swing and if overhead pressing is indicated, the standing military press and things like that. I have yet to not increase somebody's strength and get them headed in the direction that they wanted to go by following that path. So we've kind of almost made it sound like a long process. It's not. And just like and even the conversation between setting the baseline and clearing the baseline, that's not a long conversation either, unless it's complicated by pain or a history of a lot of things. You give me somebody that's been behind a desk for 30 years and they've actually developed some structural adaptation, collapsed T-spine, kyphosis. Yeah, that journey to going overhead is going to be longer, if ever. And so we may have to change and modify the goals. But the goal is always, I like to have fun. My training's fun. The results I get from my training are fun, but I don't vary my training all the time in order to create fun. The fun is in the process. And that was Dr. Ed Thomas is somebody that we've both worked with and has been influential. One of the things he said that has stuck out to me very strongly is I never went to the gym to work out. I went to the gym to learn. When was the last time you approached your kettlebell swing, your press, your deadlift, your whatever, as an opportunity to learn?
Yeah, you went to practice a skill, and somehow the workout was the side effect, not the goal. And how eloquent is that? But if you look back to fitness pictures that are easily black and white and people are wearing sleeves and pants, what you're going to see is people practicing really functional, purposeful, transferable movement that is giving them breath, posture, pattern, and fitness at the exact same time, so nothing is supplemented. They're not doing crunches. They're not doing curls. They're basically using their core in functional positions. They're using their body symmetrically or asymmetrically, and that is brilliant. The Turner-style gyms, we've seen this type of reemergence in functional fitness occur in almost every culture at some point. And then something happens like a frickin' war or a pandemic or a famine, and people forget what they just relearned for the 10,000th time, is that you can't fool nature. If you're working on the wrong aspect of movement development, it will happen.
Well,
it's called compensation.
One of the takeaways, Brett, with what, quoting Dr. Ed Thomas is, to me, I look at that as awareness. You're going to go in there to, in his words, learn. Well, you take another approach and go in there and figure out, what you're good at and what you're not good at. And then try to work on what you're not good at. But it's that underlying awareness factor that I think a lot of what you can find out in those roadblocks that people are unaware of. Wow, I didn't realize I couldn't do this or couldn't do that. Well, now you know why you're maxed out on your deadlift or your squat, is because your ankle's locked up and you're just sacrificing Peter to pay Paul type of thing. So it's that awareness factor of the other way to kind of, in my mind, that's how I would look at that, is when I'm going in to learn, well, really I'm going in to figure out, that awareness piece is pretty important.
You said make light things seem hard. And if you do everything right to even make the light things seem hard and they still can't do it, there's a good chance that's a mobility problem. And if you make it a light thing hard and it gets way better, that was a stability problem. I can't make it any more simple than that.
Small clarifier there. Make your light weights feel heavy. In other words, treat your light weights with respect. Apply.
Feed forward. That whole anticipatory pre-tensioning is a responsibility that you're going to need later on anyway.
Because if I can't bring that to a lightweight, there's really no chance of me being able to effectively do it at a heavier weight. And to your point, could easily be a mobility problem that I just can't access that pattern. If you have mobility restrictions, you have less proprioception, you don't map yourself, you cannot pattern yourself in the most efficient way. And so that all just keeps coming back around and being true. And the other aspect in working with Dr. Thomas, and I presented at the 2004 NSCA conference with Michael Castrogiovanni, and we were talking about kettlebells. And Dr. Ed Thomas was there with Juan Carlos Santana doing a history of training talk. Yeah. And they were talking about this wide-ranging aspect of this historical perspective. And they saw us doing kettlebells, and they're like, well, yeah, that's historical. That's amazing. You guys should come and, we were up on stage with Juan Carlos. I actually talked over him at one point and thought my career was over, and was really funny, but for another day. And Dr. Ed Thomas put in my hands a pair of Indian clubs. And that was 2004. And then fast forward a few years, you had met Dr. Thomas and were aware of his work. And we had him in to talk about inversion and Indian clubs. And Indian clubs are something that have become part of our methods and part of our training, and something that I get people doing. Lee, we were talking earlier, and we focus on these nice, light, 1 pound clubs. And to the point of me liking to pick up heavy things, and there are heavier clubs, maces, meals, things of that nature. I've got the heavy angle covered. I don't need more heavy in my life. I do enough of that. I need restorative. I need speed. I need coordination. I need something that's great for my joint health, something that's a skill acquisition. I can spend a lifetime trying to get better at some of these basic Indian club moves, and it helps me work with people in that balance, right? Because strength that you cannot apply never becomes power.
I've always called the Indian club sort of the upper body equivalent of jump rope. A deadlift won't make you energy store better, and jump rope won't improve your deadlift. But having both gives you every gear in the transmission you'd probably need. But your legs function like pistons. They really do. They store energy like pistons in a linear fashion in most of the time. Now, your legs have PNF patterns too, but the way we use our legs is very organized as a piston load. You use your arms like fan blades. So the circular patterns in Indian clubs helps you make the most of your strength training, and doing only one doesn't give you the best of both worlds, to the point where after you and I had already done our first DVD on Indian clubs, I started maybe taking a little bit of artistic license, and so did you, with the way we would use and teach clubs. Not that I don't think Ed Thomas had some of the best historical information in the world. We had a different population. So there was a translation and a documentation we had to do, and we took Indian clubs to the Force Plate and the K-Lab with Dr. Rob Butler down at Duke University, and my mind blew up because we were able to see some things on a kettlebell swing that we hadn't seen before, and we were also able to see some things with Indian clubs that 2 pounds in your hand shouldn't do, and it did. So.
Well, it's amazing to take an over 5,000-year-old implement.
Yeah, which was really, it was more for, it wasn't for training.
Correct. The original name is the Indian War Club, and I'm saying Indian as in from India. In the Hindu and Vedic traditions, clubs have an over 5,000-year history where the deities in the Hindu and Vedic traditions are always pictured basically with a club of some fashion. Now, that could be a heavy club, it could be a smaller club, but yes, these were weapons of war, which is why we want you to be very safe when you're using them.
But even how you train, the training of that, if you really think about I would say the traditional moves are training for protection and fighting, right?
Well, let's be honest. All of our training methods draw back to how we would train to better handle physical confrontation. So Dr. Ed Thomas talks
even
about...
running.
Well, you either need to get to the battle or away from the battle. Those are two very
As
important
Cosgrove
things.
said, I either had to learn to fight or run fast, and I'm not that fast. So
you pick your battles. But And when you look at the ancient training traditions, there was a martial component, your ability to respond to aggression appropriately. There was a restorative component, because when you're learning how to respond to aggression appropriately, and you might be getting knocked around a little bit and pushing your body, you need a way to recover and restore. And there was a pedagogical end of things, which is the theoretical body of knowledge that supports the other two. Well, we don't have a martial component much anymore. Our martial component now is fitness. Fitness has become our martial art. Not sure that that's the best or most authentic usage of that. And restoration has become a cottage industry of all of these products that people use to try to recover from their training with a bad lifestyle. And I was asked on a podcast quite some time ago, they were like, well, what's your favorite recovery strategy? And I'm like, proper programming. Because if I program myself appropriately, I should recover from my training. Now, we have to have the lifestyle conversation within that. But if you're out there in the world and you're constantly figuring out, I don't know how I'm going to recover from my training, do less.
That's the art of training. That's the art. I mean, there's a science component, but the art of really training somebody properly is giving them the right program so they do recover, so they can do more.
I tell everybody that starts with me, this is our starting point, and no plan survives contact with the enemy. And yes, right now, you are the enemy. And we are going to have to adapt this plan as we move forward, because I don't know your progression speed. I don't know how you're going to adapt to this. And I don't know if you're going to change those lifestyle things that we talked about. Because if you refuse to hydrate and do the 5 other things that I need you to do, and you're still trying to figure out how to recover from your training, I'm not going to ask you to do very much.
Just as a quick sidebar, the movement screens that some of our guys were able to do in the military on people who were both dehydrated and sleep deprived scored low compared to their baseline. Significantly low, measurably low in both their balance and in their movement patterns. Had you not known if they were sleep deprived or dehydrated, you'd be assigning a corrective strategy when really they just needed to reintroduce better electrolytes and maybe go to bed before 10 o'clock every now and then, especially when you have a hard day. And so it's real easy for those of us in movement to have a movement remedy for everything. But if we're obsessive about measuring stress dosage and not measuring recovery, then we're missing it. And I found that the people obsessed in measuring recovery just take any old load and call it fitness. And the people who are obsessed with measuring their workout stress don't seem to equally balance that with recovery. And for a little bit of education and a few devices, you can easily measure both ends now, and there's no reason not to know both. I know, heart rate variability has no placebo effect, and it's easier to get on yourself in a reliable way than it ever has before. And if your heart rate variability says this is not a good day to push hard, no matter how you feel or what you look like in the mirror, I'm believing that more than what you think or say.
And so drawing things around back to the original question of basically how do you build a monster? How do you build somebody that's really strong? Clear the baseline, understand high tension techniques, get them to the kettlebell, as in my opinion, as quickly as possible. Nail your programming, your lifestyle. Get the Indian clubs involved as a way to drop tension, keep speed, efficiency, joint health, and create a more holistic program.
I'm glad you said that, because coming to strength training with inappropriate tension is like trying to learn to punch with a clenched fist. You see most people go from relaxation to contraction in this effortless way. And so lately I've been using Indian clubs to dump tension on a day even when I'm not going to get to work out, but definitely on a day when I'm going to work out, I'll pick some of those techniques that just let me sort of loosen up, because static stretching isn't the only way to loosen up. There's so many more neural enhancing ways to loosen up.
Relaxing a muscle is actually more energy expenditure than contracting it. You have to pump things out instead of just letting things dump in. So relaxation is a skill that needs to be built. Most people walk around never knowing what it's like to be maximally tense. They don't know what it's like to relax, but they walk around in that middle gray zone,
which is inefficient on both ends.
well, not
pun,
gray.
pun intended.
No pun intended.
You don't want to spend time.
You don't want to be in the gray zone.
I can barely handle it.
No gray zone. But they walk around in that middle. They're somewhat tense all the time, and they can't relax. It's horribly inefficient. You made the joke many years ago, put on a pair of tight jeans and go upstairs. It's not going to feel the same as going up in your workout shorts. It's going to cost you more in order to do that. So when you're walking around in that semi-tight state all the time and wondering why you can't build efficiency or speed or power, it's because you don't know how to relax. One of the things Pavel talked about very early on was some Russian research where the difference between a world-class competitor and the one run down. So this is like a national level, or it was national level competitor and then one run down, is the national level competitor could relax 800% faster than the regional competitor. And so your ability to relax, and Stu talks about this when he talks about pulses, your ability to pulse, create tension, and then relax and let that pulse of energy go where it needs to go, then you have to have the ability to summate that force and have another point of tension where you deliver the energy that you've been able to relax and move from point A to point B. Is that it's very consistent whether we're talking about the martial artist who learned slow motion katas and fast movements and practiced restorative techniques, or whether we're talking, a biomechanic guy like Stu McGill who's talking about pulses and tension and relaxation. Two sides of the same coin, got to be good at both of them.
Well, Brad, you brought up something right there. We're talking about the data and research that Pavel mentioned about the elite and then one rung down. What's interesting, when we looked at some of the data and the research we have on our movement screen, the rotary stability test, in my opinion, kind of checks that, right?
Absolutely.
Is that all we're looking, with the push-up, we're checking your ability to tense up, create that tension. With our rotary stability test, and if you guys don't know it, you get in quadruped and basically like a bird dog. Now we change it up because we do one-sided, and we do a basically same side. Can you react to that and create some stability, not so much tension? And what we saw with that was the elite Olympic level, gold medal Olympic level. So when you go to the Olympics, you've already beat out very elite people. The Olympic level track athletes were getting 3s on rotary stability. One rung down, they were 2s. And I would argue that it's very similar to what Pavel was saying with the Russian athletes.
100%. If anybody remembers the old movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, when they're interviewing for the bank job that they're going to eventually rob, but they're interviewing to protect the bank so that they can rob it. And the guy throws a can out in the street, has them draw their weapons and try to shoot the can. Well, I can't remember if it's Paul Newman's or whoever's character it was. They missed the can like 3 times. And the guy's like, you don't have the job. And he goes, wait, can I move? And the guy's like, what do you mean? Can I draw? Can I move? And the guy's like, yeah, it's not going to help. No, it helped a lot, because when you tense up and try to hit a target, it's very different than naturally letting everything sink and relaxing and hitting the target. Best way to improve your rotary stability? Relax. Don't try so hard.
And I'm not trying to give it away, but people who naturally shift their weight before they change their weight distribution, who just intuitively do that. You don't tell the cat to land on their feet when you throw them in the air. They do. And so what Lee's saying is that innate ability to know I need to shift my base of support to 2 points off of 4 before I lift the other 2 points. Other people look at the move and simply attempt it with no intuition ever. And nobody will tell you why they did or didn't do it, because that is a part of movement that I think we are lucky enough to capture with the movement screen. Is if you can't do it, you cannot will yourself to a better score. We found a subconscious bottleneck in your movement. How are we going to consciously train you out of that? We're not. We're going to go back below that and recalibrate that thing.
But circling back, Brett, to creating strength and even using the Indian clubs as part of that process, you've got to have that innate ability, because that really goes back to what you're talking about with the radiation and creating that underlying kind of stability, right? To allow you to create the tension you need.
Right. And so in taking on, whether it's an internal load, if I'm doing something like a one-arm push-up, one-arm, one-leg push-up, or I'm performing a heavy kettlebell press, I need to be able to feed forward that tension, be ready for that load. But if I'm swinging a kettlebell, I now have to have those pulses. I have to have that boom, that tension to propel the weight, that relaxation to let that energy go where it's supposed to go, and then have that reabsorption and redirection of energy, which I think is the magic of all the kettlebell ballistics. Is I have this dynamic, loaded eccentric that really trains me to relax, absorb, redirect. That sounds like athletics. And so it's all of that stuff comes together. And then I do something light, restorative, skill-oriented, dumping tension. We put it together into a better package. If I just focus on strength, which I have, I'm mildly obsessional about certain things. So when I started bending nails, I went from bending my first nail, which was a 60-penny nail. I actually went to be a witness for somebody who was getting certified as bending the red nail. And his mentor was there with him, little guy named Steve McGranahan. Look up World's Strongest Redneck. Steve's about 6'4", 320 pounds. He's not a little guy. Fantastic gentleman, just a really, really fantastic gentleman. And he was looking at me while we were going through this, and he goes, "You ever try to close a gripper?" I'm like, "No, not really." He goes, "Take this gripper and do it here and do this and see if you can do that." And I closed a number 2 gripper the first time ever trying. And then he's like, "Try to bend this nail." He's like, this is kind of what you do. And he had me going double underhand, which bending people will recognize. And I bent a 60-penny nail first time I tried. He goes, "You should do this. You should do a little bit of this because you're already at a decent level." And I went from that first bending experience to bending the red nail in about 5 months.
Wow.
Because I did nothing else. I think I did some swings and I did bending. And then when I really got into powerlifting, 2005, 2006, I became squat obsessed. Bending steel, there is nothing like feeling steel give way to your strength. It is addictive for me. Squatting, there is nothing like loading the bar and squatting down and standing up with it. The way that load feels through your body, I just freaking loved it. And so I squatted. I would squat heavy 2 and 3 days a week. I just loved it. So I'm mildly obsessional when I get onto something like that. And so
I remember you telling me when you were going heavy in a lot of powerlifting stuff, you did it with the full intention knowing your movement screen was going down.
Absolutely. I was willing to sacrifice
the
quality.
And we talk to athletes about that.
Yep.
When you're going to specialize, we expect to see the asymmetries and the stiffness that's inherently protective or going to be done. And I've heard Greg Rose say this, if you're a unilateral athlete and don't have asymmetries, you're probably not training hard enough. However, if you still have them after you're training with the right coach, they're probably not doing enough functional stuff. So it's this dichotomy of knowing when you push yourself into a myopic focus or a specialized place, you're going to be giving up some of your adaptability in all other directions. The point of no return means you can never get it back, and you were never willing to lose it forever, but you went through a training cycle that got you stiffer and bulkier because you're doing things that like stiffness and bulkiness with a certain degree of skill imposed. But what really got us here is something that I'm going to set Lee up for a car analogy is own your entire RPM range of movement and exercise. There is low RPM means you know how to dump tension and sort of get ready for something. And high RPM means you do understand the responsibility of pressurization, organization prior to a sprinter in the blocks taking off or doing a bench press.
Well, Brett, during that process, though, was there a time where you're like, all right, I'm close to the point of no return?
Definitely. And I am not a garage-kept single owner that was only driven to church, to stick with the car analogies. I have mileage. And so I have some high alpha angle hips, so I have cam style FAI on both hips, torn labrum, all kinds of stuff. I still rock bottom my squats and swing and do everything very happily because I know how to manage what I have going on. And one of the things Gray talked about a long time ago is I have one major restriction in my body. I will never have hip internal rotation, and I will not be able to flex my hip past a certain point. That is just structurally what I have. Put 2 major restrictions into that system, the system is going to have problems. So I have to maintain good ankles and good midsection stability to deal with the fact that my hips won't do a couple of things. And so what started to happen was, because I was myopic and obsessional and I didn't maintain a very balanced program, I started feeling stress in the back and having a little bit of issues, some pain in my right hip, and things that led me to go, no, I'm headed the wrong direction, And I had already, I had done what I wanted to do within that. Squatting over 5 and deadlifting close to 6, I was pretty happy with where I was, and I wasn't willing to sacrifice my health in order to go further, and that's what it would have meant. And that's actually why I stopped bending years ago. Was I had gotten to the point where I was bending cut down. I think I got down to a 6 1/4 inch red nail, which the shorter you make the steel, the harder it is to bend. But I started to recognize that there was going to be, there was going to be a cost to going further. I was going to exceed my structures at a certain point. And so I was smart enough to realize that I was getting ready to sacrifice something that I did not want to sacrifice.
The philosophical statement is specialization to an extreme point will actually kill some of your adaptive generalization after a while. And I think that's an informed risk. As long as you know, then you are an adult, do what you do. But I think a lot of people don't know that if I go any deeper, and I've seen some, you and I have both worked with some triathletes that are past a point of no return of ever getting any stronger or any more functional because they've got 10,000 miles hunched on a bike with a bad running cadence and really poor swimming, but they've learned how to be ultra efficient in these tiny little slots. And their bodies just don't really straighten back up or squat back down or anything. And it's a shame to see because, I think if somebody had been there along their evolution, you could have achieved everything you've achieved in the triathlon world and not lost a fraction of this had you done it correctly.
Definitely. No, it is the more holistic approach. And to your point, if it's an informed choice that you are going to sacrifice some adaptability for now in order to get to a goal, cool. Let's take that journey. Let's get you to that point and accomplish that goal in the best way possible. Mm-hmm. But let's know that we're coming back around at a certain point. And even though you hate single leg deadlifts, we're going to be programming some single leg deadlifts for you to get you back dialed in a little bit. And I just think that whatever strength means to you, and we can draw this in many different ways. My grandmother, who passed recently, was one of the strongest people I've ever known. She's never lifted a weight. I've had examples of strength and perseverance in my family that have guided me and helped me become who I am. And I have seen people who are very physically strong. Mm-hmm. And so strength is wide-ranging. The ballet dancer that's up on stage is tremendously strong and powerful, but not going to be impressive in the weight room. And so defining strength for you, getting up and down off the ground to play with grandkids, define strength for you and pursue that.
You gave me some advice, and I've played around with it, but literally with an appropriate kettlebell, a single leg deadlift, a one-arm press, and a sort of a front rack one-sided squat is pretty holistic, meaning it has both corrective and conditioning. And if you're listening to this and you're intrigued with kettlebells, but you've been looking for an on-ramp, we've got the footage out there, but a single leg deadlift, a front squat, and a press are so fundamental and will expose you to both asymmetry and limitation, but an appropriate warm-up and a little bit of flexibility and then keep those patterns alive, that's a great fundamental base. You know, if you've got a lot of stiffness, adding some detensioning stuff with Indian clubs may show you what you thought was tightness was just tension. And so this is way easier than most people think. I didn't mention swings or Turkish get-ups, because there is a skill to that, and I'd like you to be in the room, if possible, with somebody who knows that, or really, really study film before you do it yourself. But a single leg deadlift, a front squat, and a press are absolutely fundamental. I just want to know if you'd add anything to that, or if you would agree or disagree, but just I want to give everybody an on-ramp to the world that you're talking about.
Prying goblet squat to kind of lead the charge.
Okay, and a goblet squat for those who haven't met Dan John is
holding the kettlebell by the horns, slightly away from your body, squat down so your elbow, your olecranon process hits your VM, the little teardrop muscle. Stop, press out, squat deeper through your hips, not your spine. Pry side to side and open your hips up. And that sets a tremendous foundation for that front rack squat.
Perfect.
And you know, you'll also be able to do a cheek clean and get into the press. So that comes together really well. And
what most people don't understand about a goblet squat is it's the same thing Lee and I do with a heel lift, and you've done with a heel lift. Having a weight in front of you is like having a little bit of a lift behind you, and it takes those ankles and those hips and that T-spine that may not be ready to squat and gives you just a little bit of an advantage. So whether you're prying and using tension to organize yourself, or we just give you a taste of what a deeper squat feels like with a heel lift, both work. But definitely, I think that goblet squat's a great piece of advice, just to see if you do it right and don't go much lower, you're hitting a hard stop. And if you do it right and you drop into a slot you didn't think you had, you are demonstrating a little bit more stability, is actually perceived as a lot more mobility.
Well, and last thing, because talking about kind of the psychology of strength and how we would work through with somebody, and this is something that I've questioned a couple people on, and I think it's because we're talking about movement quality, we're talking about getting to your goals, exercising, you know, all of these things. Close your eyes, and everybody at home, close your eyes, and now I want you to think of the word strength. What's the first thing that pops into your head? I want you to picture the word fit. What's the first thing that pops into your head? If that is a negative image, if I say fit and you think of a junior high gym coach that tortured you and you had an awful experience in physical education in school, don't wonder why you're having trouble pursuing your fitness goals. Because every time you say, I'm going to get fit, bing, that negative image pops up in your brain, whether you want it to or not, and you're having a negative response. Now, if the first thing, when I say strength, I think of my dad, I think of my grandmother, I think of very positive things that have me pursuing this. Mm-hmm. So have that little moment of self-exploration and awareness of when you are pursuing something like fitness and strength or whatever it is. Have that moment. Think about what is the first thing to pop into your head. If it's negative, you got to flip that script. You got to find a way to turn that into a positive and find some better relationship with that activity, and that's going to enhance your ability to accomplish it.
Well, that's pretty insightful. And whether we're talking about the current opioid epidemic, which I think is a lot of mismanaged orthopedics, or the current bad experiences people have had in fitness, they had a bad experience. And so if somebody had a bad experience in physical therapy, don't you think I'm not going to hear about it the next time they're in therapy and they're my patient for the first time, but they're lumping me into a category of rehabilitation that I left a long time ago. But we have to be sensitive to that. So yeah, if in rehabilitation, in exercise, in athletics, or in just a group fitness environment, you've had a bad experience, I hate to say it, but we got to get on through that, and better just to demonstrate through our actions, not just our talk, that we're willing to take a different tack. And movement screening doesn't go into deep individualization. It simply puts people in a category where I think they can have a nice on-ramp. That's all it does. It's not, it's only 10 minutes. There's a lot more you could know about somebody you're going to train than just their movement screen. And that's what you're saying. You need to. But doing it without that part of it makes it way harder.
And we've been talking a lot about building strength. Well, if the first thing that pops into your head when I say building strength is a bodybuilder, or it's, a super heavyweight power lifter that's blowing snot and chalk and getting ready to pull a max attempt, you're probably not going to have a real positive response to that message. But strength is the ballet dancer. It's the athlete on the field. It's the grandmother picking up their grandkids. There's so many examples that we can draw in that are incredibly positive. Think about what your relationship is with that thing that you're trying to accomplish. And if it is a negative response, work on flipping that script, because it is going to lead you towards your goals so much faster.
Well, Brett, that's a great way to wrap this up, man. And I really enjoyed this conversation and just sitting back and kind of listening to everything. And hopefully everybody else got something out of today. I know I did. And really want to appreciate you coming in and being here, being in our studio. We don't get a lot of chance to have people actually here and hang out with us. So really appreciate it, man.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And it's great to be part of the team.
Good to see you, brother.
Thank you, sir.
That'll do it for this episode of the Movement Podcast. Thanks for listening. And if you liked what you heard, please take a minute to subscribe and review. If you want to learn more about our system and take the next step in your movement journey, visit us at movementpod.com. Until next time, be sure to first move well, then move often.